All right, guys, it's been an interesting morning. I decided to get out in front of this because a bunch of things just happened. As I've been saying, this was clearly not the end of the war. Iran was clearly not just completely defeated in the last couple of weeks. They maintained thousands of missiles. They maintained the will to continue resisting, and it was kind of foreseeable that this was going to happen. By the way, if you haven't already, consider joining my subscriptions page. It's only $5 a month, and you can support what I do here, and you'll get to ask a question as long as I'm able to do that. But anyways, to just dip into it here, I'm going to bring up the map so we can see exactly what's gone on. But I think there's a couple of main stories here. I think one of the main stories here is that Iran told through state media, they said through state media that they had hit a U.S. warship. I don't think that's true. I think they fired at one, though. CENTCOM is saying that they didn't hit that warship, but there is a report that maybe they did fire at it. Another one of the reports here that's important is that they struck out at a main oil refinery in the UAE. I think it might be the only oil refinery. So if we look at the map here, we can kind of see where this is coming from. Iran directly targeted the UAE over at Fujairah, this oil refinery over there. And for people who don't know, in this war, Iran has actually targeted the UAE more than they've targeted Israel. UAE's gotten like a bulk of the fire here, and they have actually advocated for a more muscular response against Iran. So we should keep that in mind when we're talking about this. But basically, the war is back on as far as I can tell here. Missiles are coming from Iran that are targeting commercial vessels. There is oil infrastructure in the UAE that Iran had kept off the board for now. But as you can see on this map, this is where the bulk of the issue is happening right now, in the direct kind of western part of the Strait of Hormuz. Now, last night, President Trump put out a Truth Social post about something called Project Freedom. And Project Freedom looked like it was the Trump administration's way of saying that they were going to escort vessels through the Strait of Hormuz, which just, if you're needing to send warships to escort commercial vessels through a body of water, you have not conquered that body of water. You do not control that body of water. I think that was pretty obvious to anyone who's watching. And Iran made very clear that if anyone was in that body of water, that they would be treated with hostility. But Trump made it kind of seem like it was going to be a direct escort mission. And then CENTCOM put out a post kind of pushing back on it. It sort of sounded like CENTCOM was saying that Trump's statement it almost said that it was inaccurate, that it was just sort of vessel coordination was the way we put it. But we do know that one of these vessels might have been fired on in this region. Now, after the announcement, of course, the IRGC spokesperson said that no changes had been made to Hormuz. And that's where, in this area, is where a lot of the direct confrontation has happened. And to the north and west, there are apparently 2,000 vessels that are just trapped there. Now, earlier today, Iran says they hit an American patrol boat. This has gone on IRGC channels and on state media. You have to take everything Iran says with a grain of salt. You have to take everything the United States says with a grain of salt. But it does look like they may have actually fired on one of them. That being said, CENTCOM is reporting that 2 got through. So it looks like this might be taking the form of an attempt to force the Strait of Hormuz. CENTCOM says those vessels were not struck. Again, UAE has been the number one target of missiles, even more than Israel has been in this conflict. And they're now warning their civilians to take shelter. I think there's a good chance that Iran is going to lash out more at the UAE than they would at ships in the Strait. I think they probably could have struck these ships a long time ago. They definitely have the tech for it. I think the question for them is whether or not they want to actually escalate the conflict here. And to be honest, neither side really wants to escalate this conflict. For the United States, there's only so long we're going to tolerate, the interior dynamics of having a conflict like this go on. Donald Trump ran on repairing the economy and ran specifically on gas prices. There's a time limit for him, but I mean, the situation for Iran is maybe a little bit different. For Iran, their economy is already a disaster. And when I say a disaster, I mean very much different than the United States. We hear about 6, 7, 8% inflation, and that's the worst inflation we've ever heard about. Try 40% inflation, try 50% inflation, whole other thing. But this has been going on in Iran for a very, very long time. The idea that the death blow would come here from a 10-day blockade was probably always a little bit misplaced, because they were already at a completely crippled point. Even if you could increase inflation 10% more in those 10 days, would the economy have even collapsed any further? Like, you can't collapse something that's already on the ground. That being said, the facility that Iran hit looks like it is one of the only oil facilities in the UAE. So that is pretty serious. That's going to be a big escalation potentially. And I think this all just reflects the fact that ceasefire, the talks were not going well. Iran sent a memo to Trump a couple of days ago, and Trump said it wasn't good enough. There was talk about Iran maybe putting a 15-year moratorium on uranium, and that's been going back and forth through a number of circles, but I don't think that Trump can declare victory that way, because he needs to get out of this with a better deal than Obama. And the truth about the Obama deal is a lot of people don't like the JCPOA. I can see where people think that it's weak, but it was the product of a lot of sophisticated negotiations. And Iran had 25,000 pounds of enriched uranium, and we got something like 24,000 pounds of it out of the country. So this is going to be a tall order for Trump to be able to come back to the table here and say that he got a victory in these circumstances, unless he's willing to do something more muscular here, which I don't think he is. So I would imagine that this standoff continues. If I had to say, I think this is months more of this. This is not ending in the next couple of weeks, and it's not going to end anywhere near the time that things go back to normal in the Strait. So that is an update for today. I hope you enjoyed the video. Be sure to become a subscriber if you enjoy what we do here.